Hey everyone, Kevin P. McAuliffe here for Rampant Design Tools, and today we're talking about studio film effects inside of Avid Media Composer. And in this lesson, I'm going to show you how simple these elements are to get into Media Composer to work with, and why you don't necessarily need a mat to work with them to create an awesome looking end result. Now in this lesson, I'm actually going to show you different examples of how to use studio film effects inside of Media Composer using different product lines for different companies. So chances are one of the product lines I'm going to show you is one that you already have. Okay, short introduction here. Let's just get into Media Composer and let's get started. Okay, now to get started, we're going to talk about getting these Rampant Design Tools elements into Avid Media Composer. Now, most people immediately think, okay, well, you know what? You're probably going to go the import route. Now, in most cases, that would be correct. The only issue here is, as you can see, I love Rampant Design Tools elements, and I have a lot of them. Now, what's also important to keep in mind is if I come all the way back up to the top here, you're going to notice that the studio effects, the studio film effects, are 4K. So if I come in here, we'll just pick any one of them at random here, I'll just double click on it, you'll see that this element is 4096 by 2160. Now if I happen to be working in version 8.3 of Media Composer, what I'm going to do here is I'll just hide QuickTime here. I'm just going to Command Tab into Avid Media Composer. You'll see that if I come to the Format tab, you'll see that I'm in a 23976 project. I can actually come down to the 4K section, and here is a 4K DCI full 4096 by 2160 project that I could create if I wanted to import these elements at the highest resolution possible in 4K. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to not import. I'm actually going to AMA link to these files. Now you're probably thinking, well, Kev, why would you do that? Well, a couple of reasons. First, by AMA linking to them, it's not going to take up any additional space on my hard drive other than what they've already taken up by simply downloading them. The other thing that's great about AMA linking to them is that they're going to resize based on the project that I happen to be working in. Now the footage that I'm working with is DVC Pro 2398 frames per second, which is at, well, it's actually 960 by 720, but we'll just say for argument's sake that it's 1280 by 720, 720p at 23976 frames per second. So like I said, by AMA linking to this footage, it will then be able to upscale or downscale, no resolution lost, depending on the project that I'm working in. Okay, now to get these elements in here, very simple, very straightforward. I don't even need to open a bin to do it. Now, as you saw, I have a ton of Rampant Design Tools elements. So if I wanted to bring them in, what I could simply do is come up to File, I could come down to AMA Link. All I would then need to do is navigate to the folder. Now what's important to keep in mind here is that if I was to select all of the studio film effects elements here, and I was to select them all and simply say open, what would happen is a single bin would open and all of the elements would be put into there. They wouldn't be divided up into the folders that they're divided up into here. So what I normally like to do is just do a folder at a time. In this case, let's just do Film Leaks, for example, because I know that there's a lot of elements inside of Film Leaks. So all I'm going to do is simply select Film Leaks, and I'm going to say open. Okay? You're going to notice that almost instantly, Media Composer is going to AMA link to all the elements in here, and pretty much, before the time I was even done speaking, all of these elements are already in here, ready to work with. There we go. And of course I could come back, I could simply hit play it back in real time. There we go, very nice. Okay. Now of course I could go through and I could do this for each one of the folders that I want to AMA link to. I could just get in and rename everything. But what I've done is I've just gone through and I've picked a few elements here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to empty the trash here just to get rid of that bin. I'm just going to come in here, you'll take a look. Here's my film leak here. I'm going to hit play. Now something you're going to notice right away, and this is something that's important to keep in mind. You're going to notice that the black on my preview window and the black in my sequence window aren't the same. That's why with these clips, when I'm working with them, what I'm going to want to do to begin with is I'm going to want to right click on them. I'm going to want to navigate down to source settings, and you're going to notice that the color transformations have been tagged with a level scaling full range to video levels. What I'm going to do is simply select that. I'm going to delete it. I'm going to say apply, and now you're going to see that the blacks look correct. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the same for each one of these elements here. Now I could do this as a color effect in my timeline if I wanted to, but since I only have 3 elements, I'm just going to do it right from here. Okay. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So I now have the elements that I want to work with. Now, how most people are accustomed to working in this case is they're accustomed to open up a project, they're going to Command and O on the Mac, Control and O on Windows to open a bin, they're going to navigate to the bin to find the one that they want. But what happens if the Rampant Design Tools elements are elements that you use all the time and you really want to have access to them in any project that you happen to be working on? Is there a way to easily get those bins to open automatically? Well, there is. In one of the latest point releases for version 8 of Media Composer, we were given a fantastic new feature that, is one of those features that I say is sort of under the hood of Media Composer that if you're not really paying attention to, you're going to miss. And it's called the Favorite Bin feature. Now, if you navigate up to Format, or pardon me, up to the Settings tab, and we come down to the Bin setting, you're going to notice that in the Bin setting, they've actually hidden a new setting right here in the middle that says Favorite Bins Show at top of the project window or bottom of the project window. What I'm going to do is just leave it at the top of the project window, and I'm simply going to say OK. So the question now is that how do I tell Media Composer that this bin is one of my favorite bins? Well, to do that is actually very simple. What we're going to do is we're going to navigate up to Bin, and you're going to notice it right down here at the bottom. Now, the only problem is that right now it's grayed out because to actually get access to the different settings in the Bin dropdown, you actually need to select the bin first. So once I have it selected, I'm going to come back up to Bin, and I'm simply going to say Add Bin to Favorites. Now, what's important to keep in mind is I could add 1, 2, 10, 20 different bins to favorites. So if I had certain Rampant Design Tools elements that I go to all the time, I can simply say that they're a favorite bin, and you're going to notice now at the top of my project, I now have a new folder that I can twirl down simply called Favorite Bins. If I twirl that down, you're going to see that I have the same bin in here that I have in this project. So it's not really a great example to use. So let me show you how this works in a different project. Let me just switch over projects here. And you're going to notice right away, as soon as I switch over to the 2398 project, take a look at that. Right at the top, I have my favorite bins. There's my favorite effects from Rampant Design Tools. I can now come in and simply hit play. And there is that fantastic light leak ready to go in any project that I happen to be working on. Now, what's important to keep in mind about these Rampant Design Tools elements is that they don't come with mats. But to be perfectly honest, you don't need mats. You can either A, create your own mats, or B, you can simply use transfer modes from a third-party company inside of Media Composer. And I'm going to show you how to do both in this tutorial. Okay, now the first thing we're going to need is some clips to work with. So why don't we just create a very basic sequence here. I'm just going to close my favorite effects here for a second. And let's open my 2398 bin. Let's just grab some footage here. I've already grabbed some of it, but you know what? I think I'm just going to pick some different shots here. There we go. We'll take this here. I'm just going to hit B on the keyboard on both Mac and Windows to drop that into a new timeline. Let's take it from about, I don't know, maybe about there. That's looking pretty good. And last but certainly not least, I think we got a wide shot here. Very cool. Yeah, sure. Why don't we just take it right from there? I'm just going to hit B on the keyboard again on both Mac and Windows. Okay. Now what I want to do first is I want to put a couple of light leaks into this shot. Now again, we're going to do this without using any third-party plugins. I'm going to show you how to do this right here inside of Media Composer. Okay, so let's take one of our light leaks here. And it doesn't even really matter which one. Sure, why don't we take this one? Now, what we're going to want to do is I'm going to want to use this light leak as a transition point. You can see that I already have an endpoint marked where this light leak goes full screen white. So I'm going to use that as my endpoint. What I'm going to do is simply hit Y on the keyboard on both Mac and Windows, pardon me, Command and Y on the keyboard on both Mac and Windows. And I'm going to start this shot right at the edit point, just like such. Okay, we're just going to drop that in by simply hitting again B on the keyboard. I'm just going to trim this back a bit to have the endpoint start a little bit beforehand. It's looking good. Okay, and I'm going to do the exact same thing with the next light leak here. Okay, there we go again. That white frame right there. Again, we're just going to start it right at the edit point. I'm just going to drop this in like such. Let's back it up. Very nice. Look, we can even actually have it like it's one continuous light leak. Now, obviously, keep in mind, I haven't actually done the Mac key yet, but you'll see here, this is pretty much what it's going to look like. And it looks almost like I said, just like one continuous light leak. Okay. So what do we do to actually make this happen and to turn this into a proper matte key element? Well, it's actually very simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select this clip by simply hitting T on the keyboard on both Mac and Windows, Command and Y to create a new video layer, Control and Y for all my Windows friends out there. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this layer into the clipboard by simply hitting Option C on the Mac, Alt and C on Windows. Let's just drop it in here onto Video Layer 2. Now the next thing that I need to do is I need to come to the effects palette and we're going to come to a color effect. Now the color effect that we want is actually down here in the image tab right there. I'm simply going to take the color effect. I'm going to drag it and drop it right over here onto my light leak, just like such. Okay. And we're just going to step into effects mode. Shift and Y is my shortcut for effects mode. If you don't have it mapped, don't worry about it. You can simply find effects mode right here at the top of your timeline, or you can find it right over here at the bottom of the composer window. Now what I want to do is I want to remove all of the color. So I'm simply going to come to the chroma adjust section. We're just going to grab the saturation, just drag it right out like such. And we now have basically created ourselves a matte. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add the matte key effect to this. So let's come down to the key section. I'm simply going to hold Option on the Mac, Alt on Windows. I'm going to grab matte key. We're just going to drag it right down here on top of this shot, just like such. And you'll see that what we have now is not quite what we want. Because what's happening is it's actually doing the key in reverse. At this point where the screen is completely white, we don't want to be able to see the image. We want the image to be completely blocked. So all I'm going to do, again, Shift and Y on the keyboard. Let's come to the matte key section, and all we're going to do is we're going to invert the key just like that. Now what I can do is just drag through, and you're going to see that we now have that light leak doing exactly what we want it to do. Again, no third-party plugins required. Very cool. Now let's do the exact same thing with the next light leak. Again, we're going to copy to the clipboard, Option and C on the Mac, Alt and C on Windows. Let's paste that in here by simply hitting B on the keyboard again on both Mac and Windows. Again, we're going to do the exact same thing. All we're going to do is we're going to take this color effect. I just double clicked on the clip to reveal what is nested inside it. We're going to take the color effect, drag and drop. Okay. Now we're going to take that matte key and we're going to Option or Alt drop it right on there. And what we're going to have now, if I come back and hit play, is I'll be able to play through. Perfect. Now, the light leak isn't exactly working the way that I would want it to because it's not actually doing a proper leak. Because I'm doing this as a matte key and not doing it as a transfer mode, I'm actually losing a lot of what would be going on here. This would actually be sort of flickering a little bit. But like I said, if I don't have access to any third parties, this still works very good. But to be perfectly honest, chances are if you've been cutting a Media Composer for a while, you're probably going to have access to the effects that I'm about to show you. Very cool. Okay. Now again, what it's also important to keep in mind is you'll notice that right now I pretty much have 3 layers going on, and each one of these layers has effects added to them. You'll see that frame flex is attached automatically because these clips are a different frame size than the actual sequence that they're in. You'll notice that also the Rampant Design Tools elements, because they are 4K, has the same effect applied to it, a frame flex. You'll see that I have 2 effects applied on top of the other layer that I've added in of the light leak. So essentially, you know, we've got about 6 or 7 effects going on at the same time, and I'm playing them all back in real time with no issues. Now, it would also help if I actually monitored the right layer here. There we go. Very cool. Okay. Now, what I want to do now is I want to get in and I want to show you how I would create this effect using some third-party plugins. Like I said, chances are you might already have them. Now, the first one I'm going to use is from GenArts. We're going to take a look at the new Sapphire 8. I'm just going to remove both these mattes here because I don't need them for the purposes of what we're going to do, because we're going to be using, like I said, transfer modes. So what we're going to do is we're going to come to the Sapphire effects right down here at the bottom. We're going to come into the composite category, and I'm going to use the Math Ops effect. I'm simply going to take Math Ops, I'm going to drag and drop it down here onto the clip, and to be perfectly honest, I don't need to know anything about Sapphire. I don't need to know anything about how this effect works. The only thing that I need to know when I step into effects mode right there is that the operation is set to add, which it already is. All I'm going to do is take the exact same effect, I'm going to drag and drop it right over here onto the next shot as well, and basically in one drag, I've now created, and you'll see that this is a very different look. Take a look at that. Look at how good that looks now. Like I said, by doing it as a transfer mode, you actually gain back a lot of information that you lose by doing it as a matte. Now I can get in, obviously, adjust the matte, tweak it a little bit, but obviously you see a lot less work required doing things this way. And of course I could just come back to the beginning here, simply hit play. And there we go. Very cool. Transition from shot to shot. Now, if we really wanted to take things to the next level, what I could do is I could come into my favorite effects folder, and I'm just going to grab one of the great film effects. In this case, it's a vignette with some scratches going on here. Very nice. And I'm going to take this and I'm just going to add it onto Video Layer 3. I'm going to show you how we can take this and push it even further using these great Rampant Design Tools elements here. Now again, all I'm going to do is I'm going to go right back to where I was before, back into the effects palette. I'm going to come right back to MathOps, but this time instead of doing it as an additive transfer mode, what we're going to do is we're going to do it as a multiply transfer mode. There we go. Now what I actually like to do is I actually like to double up on this. Again, we're going to use the clipboard, Option C on the Mac, Alt C on Windows, create a new video layer, Command and Y on the Mac, Control and Y on Windows. We're just going to again edit this back onto that layer. And now we have a very cool effect. What I'm going to do is, just because I've probably got about 10 different effects now on top of each other, I'm going to give this a quick render. Now, of course, what's also important to keep in mind is that, I am using version 8.3 of Media Composer. I could also send this render to the background if I wanted to, and just leave it rendering. I could keep working and come back and it would be done. But in this case, the render is going to be relatively quick, so I'm just going to do it here in the foreground. Once it's done, I could simply hit home on the keyboard, and now I've created a very cool, very stylistic looking effect with light leaks and with that very cool studio film look, literally in no time flat. Very cool. Okay, so that was how to do this effect using GenArt Sapphire. Now, what if you happen to be a Media Composer editor using Symfony coming from version 7 and you have access to Boris Continuum Complete? How would we set that up? Well, let me show you how we would do it. It's actually very simple. What we're going to do is we're going to start right back down with our film leaks, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate right back up to the top to the BCC category of effects. I'm going to come into Key and Blend, and I'm simply going to choose Composite. I'm going to take Composite, I'm going to drag and drop it right down here onto the light leak. And in this case, what happens with BCC's composite effect is it defaults to a hard light transfer mode. And all we need to do is simply switch that to an additive transfer mode, and we now have achieved the same look that we had before. Now, of course, we could go through the same process again and simply take the effect from the effects editor, drag it over here, drop it right down onto the next shot, and you can see now that what we've done is basically, like I said, the exact same look that we had using GenArt Sapphire. Okay? Now, let's talk about a different application. Now, editors, like I said before, who had purchased the Symfony option when they had Media Composer 7 had access to Boris Continuum Complete. But if you were just a Media Composer user, you still had access to a great effects package called Avid Effects, which was basically Boris Red 5.5 rebranded for Avid. That's why it got the name Avid Effects. And believe it or not, you can achieve the same look using Avid Effects that we're getting right now. Let me show you how you're going to do that. Now in this case, I am using Boris Red 5.5, but the technique is going to be exactly the same. Now what I'm going to do for the purposes of just showing this to you is I'm just going to remove the top studio, the film looks, because you get sort of the general idea of how this works basically by just taking the composite mode and just switching it slightly. Now you'll see that inside of my effects palette, if I navigate down to the Boris Red category, I do have the Boris Red effect for Avid. Now like I said, if you happen to be working with Avid Effects, the technique I'm going to show you is going to work exactly the same. Okay, so all I'm going to do is I'll come back to about here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Boris Red, we want the filter effect, which is right here. You'll see it's real time. It's a green dot. So let's take that, simply drag and drop it right down here onto our light leak. Nothing is going to happen when we do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to step into effects mode and we're going to launch the user interface. Now, once I launch the user interface, you're going to notice that what I now have is I now have my light leak, which is now on video 1, and I have my clip that's on video 2. Boris Red or Avid Effects works a little bit differently, whereas it numbers the layers from top down as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as opposed to how you might normally be accustomed to working it, with 1 at the bottom, then 2 on top, 3 on top, 4 on top, and 5 on top. But once you start working with it, you're going to see that it's pretty straightforward in how it works. Now in this case, how are we going to get in and add that transfer mode? Well, remember, just like in BCC where the effect is called composite, what we want to do is with video 1 selected, what we're going to do is we're going to navigate up to the composite tab right here, and all I'm going to do is switch the transfer mode. Now what I should do here is I should turn the little eyeball back on so that we can actually see the light leak, is I'm going to switch that apply mode from normal right down here to additive. And guess what we've just done? We've just created the exact same look now inside of Avid Effects / Boris Red 5.5, inside of BCC, and inside of GenArt Sapphire, literally with a few clicks of the mouse. Again, much like we did before, I can simply take the effect from the effects editor, drag and drop it onto the next shot. I could now simply come back and hit play, and guess what we now have? Much like we did before, we have that fantastic looking light leak literally composited in a matter of seconds. So I hope that you've seen with this tutorial that no matter how you're working with these fantastic Rampant Design Tools elements, whether you don't have any third-party effects and you're just going to use the matte technique to create the effects, or whether you're going to use a third-party plugin package from GenArts or even from Boris Effects to create these cool composites, no matter which technique you're going to use, you'll be able to work with these Media Composer elements inside your Media Composer timeline in no time flat. So if you have any questions, you have any comments, or you have any tutorial requests, you can post them up on Twitter at Rampant Design or on our Facebook page at facebook.com/rampantmedia. And don't forget, we have a whole bunch more tutorials, and you can check out our entire product line at rampantdesigntools.com.